Welcome to the Occult Rejects. Tonight we are talking cosmic egg symbolism and the UFO disclosure madness going on right now. We're going to talk about alien cargo cults. We're going to talk about cargo cults that existed during World War II that exist to this very day. And today I am joined by Nick from the Occult Rejects. Nick, introduce yourself.
What up? What up? Thank you very much, Headless. I appreciate the topic. This definitely sounds like an interesting one and definitely caught my attention. Yeah, just real quick to plug myself, the Occult Rejects on all major podcasts and BitChute, Rumble, and YouTube. And again, thank you very much, Headless. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Ethan Indigo, tell them where they can find you.
Thanks so much for getting me here, you guys. Appreciate it. A great topic. It's super fascinating. All the internal and external aspects of this. So I'm stoked to be here. And I'm on all the usual social media trying to formulate my own schizo posting.
And we are joined by JJ Vance, the man, the myth, the legend, reporting live from Florida on this UFO egg mystery. So tell them where they can find you, JJ.
Appreciate the invite, fellas. JJ Vance, host of Operation GCD. As I put it on the screen there, not the vice president. Don't be confused. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Ancient alien cargo cults. That's now you're talking my language. And great for see you again, Ethan, Headless, and Nick, as always. Looking forward to the convo here.
All right. So where do we start? Well, we got to start at the beginning. And in a lot of these Proto-Indo-European language cultures, the beginning starts with an egg. An egg. That's what everything comes from. If you think about it, the egg shape is one of these universal geometries that you find in all these different bird species, all these different lizard species, all these different sort of species come from the egg. If you were to ask the ancients which came first, the chicken or the egg, they're like, you're in an egg right now. They believed that the sky represented that bottom part, that bulbous part of the egg, and the ground was like that narrow part of the egg. And you can find this in the symbolism with Mithras too. Mithras hatched from a rock that looked like an egg. And so above his head was all the zodiac signs in the shape of the bottom part of the egg. And below him was the earth. And he would come up out of this rock. But he wasn't alone, right? A lot of the ancient civilizations believed in this egg. And I don't think that it could be any clearer that what we are dealing with right now with this UFO quote unquote disclosure within the past couple of days is a ritual. However you want to feel about it, whether it came from a different planet, it came from the planet Earth, it came from a different dimension, what they're trying to show with this egg goes back to the origins of humanity. They're trying to revive this idea that we're emerging into a new form of consciousness, and they're showing it to you with some of the weirdest stuff imaginable. So if we could hop over to Twitter and show them that video real quick, there's just so much. Yeah, there's so much out there that is self-contradictory and a little bit weird about this whole situation. But
That's for sure.
if we could just listen to what they're saying, they'll tell you what ritual is going on.
Are you good for me to play it now, bud?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
As I came over this object for the pick, there was this overwhelming sense of emotion.
Is it your feeling? Are you suddenly having a mental breakdown on the job?
No, I felt like something connected with me. I felt like something had tuned in to me and my soul and was providing me some sense of guidance on what to do and how profound what I was doing was. And it was so overwhelming that I began to cry. And then I'm confused as to why I'm crying at the same time. And then do I abort the mission? So I just did my best to focus on my particular cues when doing this type of work. And I got the load hooked up and I began flying away. And once it was just me and that object in between the pick and the drop site, there's about 20 miles in between, I felt like something was inside of me. I felt like I was possessed by the most beautiful spirit I'd ever been possessed by. And
Was it loving?
it was loving. But there was a sense of sadness at the same time. And
Had you ever had an experience like this before?
no, it was a very feminine energy. I'll tell you that. It felt like the spirit of God, but not in any masculine sense. And it wasn't like a soul. It was like a frequency that I was connected with. And whatever that force was, since that night, it has stayed with me. And as crazy as this sounds, it's what's guiding me now. And it's what's providing protection for me.
It's changed your life.
It's changed my life.
Well, there you go. So that was the pilot who is foregoing all security clearances and everything else
Right.
imaginable to tell everybody the good news that this egg was laid by Gaia. I'm just going to put it out there. There's a Gaia element to this. From my own personal workings, my spiritual practice consists of singing to the gods. When you sing to the gods, you can actually change the energy in your body to align with the energy of these different deities. We can get into the definition of a god and what that means, but anybody can do it. Anybody can start to connect with these things. And the exact emotion that guy is describing is what you will feel when you get into a trance and start singing to Gaia. You will feel that love and that sadness. It's overwhelming. It will cause you to cry. If you've ever, go ahead.
Interesting. So sorry I interrupted you. I thought you were actually going to stop before you say get into cry. And now I feel bad that I interrupted the emotional part. I'm so sorry. But I was going to add, like, is this almost, this sounds very much like things that I have done in the past with taking on the God form of something before I do a ritual. Is that kind of like what you're kind of like bringing in that the idea of that God as you're singing? Is that what you're doing?
Right. Well, because
I used to do that kind of in a different way.
For reference, I think it's important to define a god, right? So in my experience, this is my definition of what a god is. It's a personification of a sphere or a circle of influence. So if you believe there's one God over the entire universe, that would still apply to this definition. If you believe there are lots and lots and lots of gods over all sorts of other things, you're personifying those energies that are over top of that thing, and you're trying to connect with it. This is why people get confused by all these different labels of all these different gods, but the ancients had what they called syncretism, where they would look at the attributes of these different gods worshipped by these different people and then say, I know that energy. I felt that energy. I can tell you that this is most like this thing. And in doing so, they're making that sort of meshing of these different cultures and having a cultural understanding that they didn't really have before. Now, in the case of this Gaia idea, this goes back to Greek mythology, where they're talking about Urania. And Urania is both the muse and the origin of the universe, right? So she's one of the 9 muses. She talks about music, and she talks about all this other stuff. But then you get deeper into the mythology and you find the Orphic egg is laid by Urania. So before there was anything else, there was this Urania character, and she had her feet on nothing, and she wanted to put her feet on something. And so this snake came out of nowhere, and that snake that came out of nowhere had her lay an egg. It wrapped itself around that egg 7 times, and then that egg hatched with Phanes Protogonos, according to the Orphics. And Phanes Protogonos is the firstborn, Light, the firstborn. And Light, the firstborn, then gave rise to everything else in the universe. They talk about, from like a Parmenides perspective, they believe that everything is sort of layered and tiered down from that one original source. So before there was anything, there was Urania, this muse, one of the 9 muses. And also she gave birth to everything with this egg. Now, that's not the only form of mythology we're going to talk about tonight, but does anybody have anything that they'd like to throw in right now? Because this really gets into those cargo cults.
No, I'm good.
Well,
No, it sounds pretty interesting. I like it.
Were you going to mention Pangu Headless?
You bet I was. I saw that comment on the monkey on top of the hill was hatched in an egg. That's so Pengu.
And then there's, I think it was he referring to Hanuman or in that comment?
Well, I think Pengu was the first, right? So Pengu was this giant that came out of a rock, and on his body were all of the features on the planet Earth, right? So his spinal column would be the mountains, his shoulders would be the cliffs. Basically, it's the anthropos, the idea that all of the Earth can be taken down and boiled down into this anthropological figure or this man-like figure. Do you want to pull up the Chinese drawing of Pengu? I think I sent that to you.
Yeah. Give me 1 second just to pull it up real quick.
And what does this monkey do? I'm not familiar with this Pengu monkey.
Yeah, neither am I, actually.
Right. So they call him the Chinese Prometheus because he is the one that gave us fire, right? And also in his hatching from this egg and being the first one to separate the sky from the earth, he was capable of transforming and changing the environment that we see. And then he eventually became the earth itself. So he's this sort of heroic figure that separates all of the things that were once meshed together. And then his body itself, the body of this giant Pengu, then became the earth and all the things that we see around us. So we're sort of living on the back of this Pengu character.
And the fleas that he was infested with is what we are.
Right. So this is Phanes protogonos. This is the guy that comes out of the Orphic egg, right? So we'll get to that in a minute. But
sure.
Through here.
Just let me know when to stop.
Yep. Orphic egg. Keep going. A little bit more. He might be the very first one I sent you. Oh, yeah. That's the video of the egg hanging from the. If you go back one. Right. So as you can see with that Orphic egg, it's wrapped up in a snake. Well, this egg is wrapped up in a rope and it's being hung from this helicopter. You see, so this is the downward view from the helicopter down towards this UFO object.
Yep.
And that's supposedly this UFO egg wrapped up in this rope and being carried from one point A to point B. And everybody makes fun of it. They take black and white videos of themselves swinging an egg around underneath it.
I've seen this. It's good.
Right.
Parody.
And so, but yeah, I mean, you're looking at the Orphic egg. Whatever kind of ritual they're doing has to do with this origin of mankind. So let's keep going here.
Hasn't famous people done stuff like that, put themselves in eggs and shit? Didn't Gaga do something like that to an extent?
Gaga came out of an egg. Yeah, she hatched for her concert. Mork and Mindy, that old UFO show. What is he flying through the universe?
Right there, 233 mm.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's right there. They're telling you over and over again the aliens are coming from the egg. The new eon is coming from the egg. So. But this Pengu guy, if we could scroll over to him, I think he might be the first one on that.
I don't know. I'm starting to think maybe I don't have it. These are only ones I got.
Oh, all right. Well, so
these are ones Ethan sent me. I'm just going through them. Maybe. I don't think so. Damn. Sorry.
Yeah, but so there you go. There's another image of this egg that they say was inside of a cave in Antarctica. And there's so much about this cave that goes back to the Mithras cult. And Mithra was another one of these characters. That's Mithras emerging from the egg, but they call it a rock.
I got a quick question for their headless. That egg that they just showed the News Nation footage from, that came from Antarctica, supposedly?
This guy did not say that it came from Antarctica. What he didn't specify the location. He said that the psychics working for the government called this UFO down doing a CE5 type ritual.
Sure.
And then he was tasked to go out there, hook it up, and then make the pick and fly it back about 20 miles away.
He referred to the location that this happened at as the range which I guess is a reference to a place in Utah, where there are a couple of different bases.
Well, it could be Utah. That would make sense totally with
yeah, that's what I inferred.
right. That makes sense with the Mormon obsession with UFOs and UFO cultism and everything
sure.
else. But range is what they call all of the open land used for any purpose around any military reservation. So if you're out there hunting on a military reservation, you're going to be hunting on the range. It's all the places that don't have buildings, basically.
Right.
I grab that for you.
There's a lot of bombing areas out there too. I'm sure that could be covers a lot of real estate. These ranges out there in Utah.
I got you.
He mentioned a second story where he was in Sierra Nevada, but it wasn't the same location. I think that is the story where he talked about him getting what seemed to be radiation exposure effects.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There's a lot of these eggs. This would be the sculpture of Pengu. I believe that's on the Mongolian steppe. The Mongolians are the tie between Proto-Indo-European language and the Chinese. The Chinese have lots of different Proto-Indo-European words that they borrowed from the Mongolians, who are related to the Huns, which go all the way back to the Proto-Indo-European language root. So all of the languages we speak in Europe come from Proto-Indo-European language roots. Hebrew comes from Afro-Asiatic language, so it's a little bit different. But if you're talking about Sumerian, as they refer to it as like one of the first written languages, they would say Sumerian is a standalone language, but the language of the Akkadians was a Proto-Indo-European language root. So when the Akkadians conquered the Sumerians, everybody tried to speak the holy language of Sumerian, but it was just too hard for them. So they decided to sort of blend it in with Akkadian. And that's how Proto-Indo-European languages were supposedly first recorded with symbols, creating a written form of it. Now, this spoken language was all over the globe, and it had so many different forms by the time Sumerian came around that it almost doesn't make any sense to focus solely on the first written language as opposed to all of these spoken languages. And in all of these spoken languages, you've got this egg symbolism, egg UFO cargo cult symbolism. This is where the gods came from. This is where the people who formed us came from. And then you see in the Sumerian, Akkadian mythologies, you have this Enki and his brother Enlil. And Enki and Enlil would represent this kind of Elohim type first gods that are talked about as these sort of pseudo alien figures that are forming man, that are forming the idea of what humans are as opposed to what other creatures are in this mythology. So it really does come down to this egg is the first UFO cargo cult. They see these things flying around in their sky. They're like, what is this? Maybe they have psychic connections to something happening here.
Sure.
I mean,
Did you ever see that one painting where the UFO in the sky does look like an egg?
but there's the one with the
Oh my God, it's like an old one, and people point at it saying like, "Oh, look, they were seeing UFOs back then," but it was more of actually an egg. Anything,
right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a painting of Jesus Christ on the cross where you've got these two figures that look like it might be related to the sun and the moon on either side, but they're egg-shaped UFO craft that are on either side of this mural, and it's bizarre. And so Fabergé eggs, another perfect example. Like this one's upside down. You've got to have the fat side on top and the skinny side on the bottom. Now, why with the Orphic egg would it be the reverse? Maybe it's to kind of indicate where this snake energy is coming from. And what's interesting too is that the Egyptians had a cosmic egg as well. And what the Egyptians believed was that there were four primordial males, 4 primordial females. And the 4 primordial males were in the shape of frogs, like Kek. Kek would be one of these primordial gods from the Egyptian mythology. And all of the females are in the shape of serpents. So they've got these serpents and these. I think you have the stela there of the snakes and the back one. There we go. Oh, you passed it. So these would be the ones that laid the egg together. So you've got all of these frog-faced primordial males and all of these serpent-faced primordial females. And together between the frogs and the serpents, they were able to coalesce the Ogdod into an egg, and that egg erupted into all the creation that we see around us. Very interesting. But before the egg was the primordial chaotic sea. There was no form. It was all hidden underneath this chaotic sea. And so this primordial egg was immortalized in the Benben stone, which is the first piece of land that emerged from this primordial sea of chaos in the Egyptian pantheon. And what you'll find is that despite all of the different myths, they all have sort of this idea of the Benben stone emerging from this chaos. So they had several different mythologies in Egypt that represented the beginning of creation, but it all had to do with this Benben stone emerging from the waters, emerging from the chaos. You can go into the idea of Noah and the ark, right? So he sends these birds around, and one of them finds dry land, bringing back a branch, showing that there's something out there like this Benben stone that they can land on. And so you've got the idea of the waters of chaos being put to bed by the egg. Think about the Matrix too. What's he inside of? This sort of sack
Pods
right? So he's inside this egg or pod that he's emerging out of, that eventually is this sort of awakening of consciousness, seeing what the world looks like for what it is. And so they're feeding us all this egg symbolism. It was an egg, and these people are making jokes about it, and they're making all this fun stuff. If you go back to this one right here, right before this.
Okay. Hold on one second. This one or the other one, right?
The one right before it. Yep. There we go.
Oh, okay. I see the snake wrapped around it.
You see the snake wrapped around it? You see he's kind of standing on top of this globe or this egg. And this has so much to do with Baphomet, right? So this is a Roman version of the Aeon, right? And the Aeon is the idea of the spirit of the age, right? He's got this lion face. He's got the wings like an angel. He's got his junk covered up. You can see a little bit of Roman symbolism there. He's got the torch in one hand. You know, that if you scroll ahead another 2, you'll see what the Orphics thought of this. This is what they called Phanes Protogonos, but the Romans are calling this guy Aeon. And if you look at early Roman, one more. There we go. This is what the Greeks saw as Phanes Protogonos. So you've got the Greek version and the Roman version of this Aeon figure. You can see he's still got a little bit of the egg yolk on his head. He's standing with the bull hooves on top of the bottom of the egg right there. And you can see that's the narrow part of the egg, and he's wearing the fat part of the egg as this crown, right? And so this is how, and around his body, you can see all of the different signs of the zodiac. So it's not just that he's emerging from the egg, but the planet that we're on, the middle point of all of this stuff, is like an egg as well. So it's like eggs within eggs within eggs. It's all Russian nesting dolls of eggs. We're all emerging. We're all going back into the egg when we die. All the rest of this stuff sort of condensed down into this first original primordial view of the beginning of everything. And so it's a lot like this idea of the Big Bang, but also when the egg inside of a woman is fertilized by a sperm, there is a reaction between the zinc and the calcium inside of the egg that produces a type of flash of light. So as soon as the sperm is entering the egg, the snake is entering the egg. There's a flash of light, phanos, which, right? How would they know this stuff? There's something primordial about this egginess to our very nature.
We come in with the flashlight and we go out with one.
Right. Well, we can all hope that we go out with a bang, because you don't want to have.
That's what it seems like for me, from my experiences. It's a flash of light. Something I want to say about this image is this is total hermit card to me. At least the Golden Dawn one. They had you got the snake underneath him. He's holding the staff. He does have like kind of one hand open though. Another thing to me, even with this, and why I see more of the hermit card too, is because the hermit card would fall in between Tifereth and Chesed, and the sign for Tifereth could be a child. So I could even see interplay how that card to me would kind of almost have like maybe an in between of both those spheres. So just I see how the hermit card can maybe be played off of this idea, or part of this idea, whatever it's trying to show as well. I think the hermit card, in my opinion, or a lot of the stuff with the snake, especially because the hermit card's going towards Chesed now. That's an abundance. That's Jupiter. That's expansive. I think the snake is the twisting of your pupil close and the abundance of light, or your other eye filling in. That's my opinion, and that's why I think the hermit sometimes has this. So the stuff with the hands, I think, is either showing that the pupils open or closed, and the snake is going to do whatever. It's going to either open up or it's going to eat itself or swirl up. That's my opinion. But yeah, I do see, for some reason, just as soon as I saw this and I noticed the staff in his hand, the first thing in my mind was the hermit card.
Well, as any good Catholic knows, this right here is the fourfold angel. Do you see any resemblance between this fourfold angel with the bull and the eagle and the lion and this Honest Protogonos? It's the same thing. If you're inside the church and you see these symbols, they're saying that there is a spiritual root that all of this stuff is coming from. And unfortunately, they're not going to tell you about what that is. They're just going to tell you about the iconography that they know about. But once you track the iconography over and over again, I got that from Mario from Symbolic Studies, right? Mario is talking about the composition is the four living creatures as tetramorph. So that four living creatures tetramorph is the Catholic version of Phanes Protogonos, Eon from the Roman, and now the tetramorph under Christianity. They're talking about the same stuff here, people. It's all emerging from the egg. They're all part of this ancient form of cargo cult. That's really what.
That's a great point you make there. I mean, that's a really compelling argument when you see all these things. I mean, obviously, a lot of Christianity stuff has obviously been known to being adapted from other previous religions and whatnot. But I mean, I think it does speak to this cargo cult concept that I like to claim. We live in a world of ancient alien cargo cults that folks are leading the world, and they subscribe to these ideals and try to replicate these things that will bring there's no practical value to their activities.
Yo, when the hell are we going to start a cult? I feel like everybody else is doing it.
Our cult is exposing the other cult.
Yeah, right.
Mark Passio says, I'm a de-occultist. Right, where you're revealing the hidden, which they try to
de-occulting.
There is an expression, I have never been able to find the exact root of it, but I've heard it referenced many times. Culture runs down, government runs downstream of culture, and culture runs downstream of religion. So all these ideas are really like, even when you don't know about them, are so governing to the whole kind of spectrum of society. I wanted to add on Pangu, as a primal entity. And I've noticed this being kind of a constant with really primal entities, that he has horns. And some people relate that to the pillars or any number of symbological traits, or maybe even antenna, being able to connect and communicate, maybe. And also he comes out with a hammer and chisel, which is kind of the primordial symbolism before the square and compass, right? And he hammers and chisels the world before he dies and becomes it. And the variety of how those stories go.
Right. So if you look up the cherub of Ezekiel, that's where you'll find the tetramorph, right? So the tetramorph has these wings. They emphasize the wings a lot more than they do the heads. The tetramorph idea is sort of put in the background as to how many wings and eyes these things have. And then you have the biblically accurate angels, where they're talking about all these wings, all these eyes, all these circles within circles, and all the rest of the stuff, which is like visionary experiences of these basic principles. So another way of showing this egg would be by identifying it as this torus, right? This torus frequency, the shape of this donut idea. And this donut shape is over the entire globe. It's how magnetic charges pass outside of our atmosphere and back down into the South Pole. So the North Pole is giving out that charge. Maybe the North Pole is sucking in the electrons and the South Pole is spitting them out. I'm not sure which. But you have the idea that there is a frequency of electromagnetic energy that is enveloping the world as this sort of electromagnetic egg. And in my experiences, the god Oceanus is less related to just water, and he's more related to the electromagnetic nature of the enveloping of this planet. So in the mythology for Greek, they talk about how Oceanus is the rivers that surround the world. And if you're seeing it from a perspective of an ancient Greek having a visionary experience, you're going to see whatever you're on being surrounded by this luminous energy that encircles it. In other words, it's like this is the egg yolk, right, around this vast egg there. So in my opinion, Oceanus is more related to the ambient electromagnetic forces within our atmosphere as opposed to just water, because those forces are still present in water as well. And there's a lot of charge in water, but I believe it has more to do with that electromagnetic energy. And Oceanus is a pretty interesting character because Hera in the Greek mythology, or Era, right? She's referred to as this sort of a time construct, while at the same time being this feminine construct. She believes that Oceanus and Tethys are the first primordial god and goddesses. So she comes out of the water because they're the ones who adopted her. These are the Titans who adopted Hera. Now, Oceanus was never involved in Titanomachy. He's never fought in any of these battles against the Olympians. He's always just sort of been in the background because maybe he is the primordial one. He is the egg, right? This ancient sort of idea of electromagnetics covering the planet could be the idea that we're formed as this egg, and that when this egg breaks apart in some way, we enter a new eon. Maybe it's the precession of the zodiac. All of this stuff goes back to the zodiac figures. Even the tetramorph goes back to these zodiac figures. You know, you've got the head of the bull, the head of the eagle, the head of the lion, and the head of the man being the head of the angel on that tetramorph, having to do with these four seasons. You've got earth, fire, water, and then sort of man or this airy energy sort of right in the middle of all of it.
Sure.
even in that tetramorph figure, you get the idea that we're in the middle of all of these things. Now, in the tetramorph, they've gotten rid of the snake and replaced it with a curvy sword. So instead of a curvy snake, you've got a curvy sword. But the idea behind that tetramorphic sword is kind of the same idea as this snake. It's the piercer, right? If you think about what the sperm is piercing the egg. It's creating that light energy. So what they're trying to do is they're giving you the figure of the egg. I don't know if they're the ones who are going to crack it or if we're supposed to be the ones to crack it in this formulation. But if they're giving you the egg, there has to be a crack. That's the idea beyond going into a new eon. And maybe that requires some sacrifice. So don't be surprised if there is something associated with these deities, these figures, this stuff coming to light, and sacrifice. Now,
Like we talking like ritual human sacrifice here?
Right. But you could say any war could be a ritual human sacrifice
Sure.
if it's concocted enough. You could say any natural disaster that's not responded to properly could be a ritual human sacrifice, right? There's lots and lots of ways that the world's controllers could initiate ritual human sacrifice without having to pull people up on the altar, open their chest up, and throw their hearts out to the crowd.
Oh, for sure. You gotta crack a few eggs to build a humanity, I guess.
That's it. And this is the oldest religion of all time, and it all has to do with the egg. So you tell me, does the oldest religion of all time probably have something to do with human sacrifice? You better fucking believe it does. I mean,
yeah, I think so. I think that's a
Abraham
great
took
point you're making.
Abraham took Isaac up on that hill to kill him because that was part of the earlier religious concepts in that area.
I mean, I would consider a religious war already considered sacrifice because you're killing in the name of your God.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Kill more of them than they kill of you, and you've won, right? You know?
Yeah, that shows you whose God is real.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Unless you've got the dying God.
Could you imagine that? Motherfuckers willing to kill each other over trying to prove something they've never seen or touched or tangible is real.
This is why I like paganism a little bit more.
That's power.
What they would
for sure.
In pagan wars,
almost jealous.
They would kidnap the other city's idol, right? So they would go in and they would
capture
say,
the flag.
"This is more powerful than you. We're going to take your idol and take it back with us." It was like a game of capture the flag.
Yeah,
if you captured that idol. You were more powerful than it. But strangely enough, that was a form of diplomacy because once you took that idol back to your home base, then all of the worshipers of that idol had to come to you and pay you tribute to come see their God.
No, that's a good point. That's an interesting way to develop a new whole new system over there around these things, huh?
A whole new.
I didn't realize there was so much of this kidnapping of the icons of the other opposing forces.
This is where you get the idea of the dying and rising gods, is because not only would you be able to kidnap one of their idols, but also what if you got that idol back? Or what if somebody had a vision of that idol changing and transforming and becoming something new? So you've got this dying and rising God sort of blooming into something else because the belief systems now have to change based off of the facts on the ground. So something has to change. Therefore, the God has risen again.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like it.
So I want to get into cargo cults for a minute. Have you ever heard of John Frum?
I have not, no.
Not until you posted that stuff on Twitter earlier. That was interesting.
So John Frum is the oh man, I can't believe I'm blanking on this. What do you call the initial party to make contact with anybody?
CC?
No,
like a diplomat?
No. These are the reconnaissance.
Oh.
Right? So the recon brigade or the recon element goes out there and finds a place for you to set up shop, whatever you have to do. And then they report back And then those recon guys giving their information. Look, he's got the egg on top of his head too, just like
Yep.
Faunus protogonos.
Yo, and the other one had a crab and that whatever type animal that is on his leg. It matches right here
Horse?
too again. Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that's a horse.
That's the Masonic arch. The crab is always at the
Yeah.
top of the Masonic
Yeah.
arch, all an egg.
Cancer.
That tells you the time of year. That's high summer right there. That's what the Masonic arch is all about. It's all right there if you know what you're looking for.
I mean, that's kind of in relation to Sirius, right? With the Masonic business and stuff there. So is there I'm not familiar enough with the Sirius tales or legends or lore. Is there anything egg related in there?
Well, the dog star, and dogs love munching on eggs. I don't know. But no, that is a good point. And Washington, D.C. itself has the streets centered around the height of the dog star in the summertime. So the streets from Capitol Hill, if you look straight down one of the streets at Capitol Hill, you can see the dog star rising straight up and down over that street, exactly where they've laid the proportions out to. So Washington, D.C. is a dog star city.
I believe that's Constitution Avenue, I believe that you're referring to.
Could be. I'm not sure. I'd have to be there and watch it. But they have witches and covens that are specifically allowed to do rituals out there in Washington, D.C. as the rising of the dog star is happening. I don't know if you've ever heard the song, but Eye in the Sky by I forgot his name. He's a big producer in the 1970s. He makes a lot of smooth music. He's done so much for the rock scene back then. Anyways, he had this song called Sirius, which you hear before all the basketball games, right? But I can't really sing it. But anyways, the Sirius song is what you hear as the basketball players are coming out to the field. Like anytime the Bulls are coming out, you hear the song Sirius by this guy.
Weird.
Really interesting. Right. So if you think about the
Alan Parsons
Project, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Sirius,
Rover in the chat brought that up for us.
There you go. Well, you know what I'm talking about. That song is called Sirius, and it's on the same album as Eye in the Sky. And the cover art for that album is the Eye of Horus, right? So he's getting really deep into that ancient mythology that's supposed to activate the parts of your mind that associate with this stuff, the ancient ancestral memories, right? Once you understand that, you can see how people like Alan Parsons are trying to crack your egg, right? The person who cracks the egg is the guy who gets to cook the dish, right? And in a lot of ways, Alan Parsons was the type of producer who really cracked the egg in the 1970s and early 80s. He produced all the music that you know of in the top 10 back then. He was doing all that stuff. The Alan Parsons Project was not as popular as all that stuff, but he was happy to stay in the background with one hit. I am the eye in the sky looking at you. Everybody knows that song, right? It's all the elevator music. You can identify it without ever having to hear a single word from that song. It's like, I know this thing before. He's activating that part of your brain. And, Alan Parsons was a huge occultist, very big time.
Okay.
So you look through his stuff, you're going to start to see it on almost every level. But,
that song you just sang is his?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, come on.
And that is a brutal song. It's all about direct mind control using the most brutal type of methods. It's just like right in your face. I'm never going to listen to what you have to say. You call me a liar, I say, so what? All sorts of that kind of imagery. It's like, it's a brutal dictatorship he's describing in that Eye in the Sky song. I encourage people to re-listen to it.
That itself just like sounds, suspect. It sounds like the orphan. I was even saying to Ethan, I mean, I know it's a stretch, but I mean, sometimes, in my opinion, when you see UFOs, especially if you make the inner part different, to me, it does kind of resemble just like an eye looking down. I mean, it's just very, I don't know.
And the eye in the Ben stone. The eye in the Ben stone is on the back of our dollar bill. So, the top of the pyramid is called the Ben stone. And that's where they put the eye, and that's where the UFO is. And they're telling, I mean, how many times have we seen all of these conspiracy charts where they put at the top of all the rest of these other human hierarchies, the alien human or the alien menace being at the top of that pyramid stone? I don't think those are genuine. I believe that's part of this UFO cult. They really want these people to come back and rule humanity.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean that's ultimately what they think, right? They think they're calling back their creator, right? I mean that's what they want everyone else to believe by perpetrating these ideals around society.
Right. And just like the idea of Urania, as she's disguised as just one of these muses, what they're saying is that the spirit of connection is dwelling amongst us already. And what they're trying to do is use that spirit that already exists within popular society to awaken something else.
Right.
Yo, Ethan, did
Speaking
you
to
want
the
to share-
subconscious, huh?
Sorry.
It's all about the subconscious. That's where your
Oh, good, Nick.
ancestors are.
My bad. Ethan,
No,
did
go
you
ahead.
want me to show any of your pictures? I didn't know. whether-
Well,
send me
well,
the-
this one, yeah, no, those other ones I thought were interesting. Well, that one before with the alchemy symbol and the other symbols.
I'll go back.
I was looking at some of the supposed reports that they had on UFOs or UAPs or whatever, had this aspect where they were a geometrical shape within a sphere or circular sphere. The square, particularly, and a pyramid or a triangle or four-sided pyramid. So I thought that was interesting and related to the Philosopher's Stone, which has the 4 parts, similarly to Ezekiel's having the 4 parts. And that's a crop circle, which is similar to, strangely enough, all of these things. It's like anomalous and, again, anecdotal reports. I don't know, but there's so many of them that kind of line up. It makes you go, and I was sharing the Egyptian monolithic carving there in the idea of gods and angels, or gods and angles, and that one has so many neat lines. I thought for sure there are numerous things being communicated. Nick, the other one with the mother and father and the children, those lines may or may not be, every one of them may or may not be communicating something, but it something that I've been seeing presented recently is the monolithic idea, or certain monolithic shapes have the 23.5, right? Is that the axis of the Earth, depicted in linear dimensions of the carvings, and so on? And it just goes to and some of them really rudimentary and old, not that they weren't good, but they're just super old. And he was pointing out these angles, and I thought that just goes to show some of the point of where there are maybe lessons evoked in these images and ideas, and often enough they might even have celestial or cosmic teachings or relationships, but the cargo cult mind will come along and hijack it and put it into a monolithic idea frame and have everyone in an external religious mind, instead of like, oh, let's explore the symbolism of this. So I just was sharing that because I thought for sure there are things being communicated in those lines and angles of.
Well, I got something on that. So back to John Frum. John Frum, also called John Brum, John Prum, is a figure associated with cargo cults on the island of Tanna in Vanuatu, formerly the New Hebrides. He is often depicted as an American World War II serviceman who will bring wealth and prosperity to the people if they follow him. In 1960, a BBC documentary, British broadcaster David Attenborough asked the locals what John Frum looked like and was told, "He looked like you. He got white face. He tall man. He lived long South America." In the 1990s, there were still reportedly over 5,000 members of the John Frum movement. There are lots of John Frummers that are still in Vanuatu to this day. And I would argue that the World War II cult is still in America, as well as in the formerly New Hebrides Island. I believe that most people are stuck on that World War II idea. The idea that war can bring prosperity. The idea that if we just believe hard enough, all that prosperity can flow back into our society. I believe we're in a World War II cargo cult in popular political mythology right now, right?
Sure.
Most of the rest of the island has been converted to Christianity because of John Frum, because John Frum is a Christian. So go figure, the Christians use John Frum to convert people to Christianity. So, well, wouldn't you like to be part of the religion that John Frum is a part of?
Don't you want to be more like John?
Right.
What would John do?
I was just thinking. It's awesome. You said it as I was thinking. It's like an echo in my head.
Right. Nice.
So this guy John Frum has evolved into different characters over the years. At first, it was about the cargo, and now it's about the spiritual nature that John Frum can bestow upon you. John Frum can give you the spiritual acumen to feel peace all the time because he can bring that cargo of peace to your island. Peace through strength, peace through the food he can drop from the sky. So John Frum is economic prosperity and he is spiritual prosperity as well. The John Frum cult today is mostly about John Frum as an archetype or an avatar of peace and prosperity.
Interesting.
So there have been developments in the John Frum cargo cult from the time of World War II when they actually landed on these islands to today, where John Frum is a spiritual figure who you can connect with and have a spiritual relationship with. And now I think what we need to do is we need to bring the John Frum cargo cult home. We need to convert all of the boomers to the John Frum cargo cult so that their spirits can be at peace with the peace that they've brought us, which is no peace at all.
Right. That's interesting, the evolution of the concept of this deity, this John Frum deity, right? Because when I try to explain to folks that we live in an ancient alien cargo cult society, like a society run by ancient alien cargo cultists, it does get to be kind of a complicated narrative at times. But when you try to explain these evolutions, so that's a great example of kind of these evolutions of how these ideas do progress. Because we see these ancient, like for example, we see these 3,000, 4,000 year old statues, right? And they're showing these same concepts, right? That were, these egg concepts and everything else that we're discussing, but those concepts have obviously evolved over the years and over time. And I think that John Frum's a good example of that.
What is cargo if not for a misshapen egg? Instead of cracking open eggs that are full of this bounty, you're cracking open these cargo crate containers that are full of bounty.
Sure.
Cubic cargo.
Ethan, was there any of these pictures you wanted to talk about?
Well, I thought the egg symbolism in that hermetic egg there is pretty interesting. Yeah. And for the longest time, I am thinking this is I don't want to say merely, but initially a primal symbol. But now I wonder, like, maybe eggs just turned up every once in a while as an anomaly. Like, but I also wonder too how much of this is, not necessarily credible. And the next image, I guess, came along soon after this interview where he shared the egg on a snake or rope. And it has the egg in the cave, and there were noted to be Egyptian numbers on it, which I mean, I don't know, but I find it all really fascinating, especially in context to the Immaculate Constellation program, right?
Sure.
Which just got such a talk about World War II Americana cult. That is just such a Christian mindset name for "we found it" type of tech, or we're looking for it type. That Immaculate Constellation is just a fascinating phrase. But that also being related to, I believe it was, I had it earlier, Operation Starfish or Starfish Prime, where they weren't, at first you think Immaculate Constellation is them, oh, hey, we found an egg or a saucer or what have you, and we're going to go get it. But it turns out that at least part of it, as they're explaining, was made up of them taking down these objects. And Immaculate Constellation, Starfish Prime, was one of the biggest, and they did very few, difficulty of technology and problematic of radioactive fallout. They did very few upper atmospheric tests. But this one, as the story goes, and I'm sure we've all heard this whisper before, or this kind of theme in the UFO kind of area, where there's how they're attracted to or interested in radioactive elements and nuclear things. And the military at this point in time, JFK was president, and it was during the Cuban Missile Crisis when this happened, this test. They apparently gathered a bunch of nuclear objects together to attract these objects that were attracted to it. They experienced, and set off a huge explosion. And in one of the unedited films of it, I apologize, I was looking for it, couldn't find it. There is a clip of the detonation in the upper atmosphere and a thing falling down. And then there's also the edited version where the guy in charge of hiding it simply put a triangle onto the film, and therefore it was hidden. So the nuclear and the potential.
Ethan, about the nuclear. Please. Look at the god driving that chariot across the clouds, dropping the egg.
Oh wow!
Oh yeah!
Dropping the
good eye
onto the ground. All those babies are being born out of the egg. If this
please no, continue. Sorry,
I was going to talk about the Cabbage Patch Kids in Tartaria. Right? That's the thing that first popped into my mind, is these cloned kids or whatever, sort of emerging from these eggs, producing the new generation, and they just sort of drop them. Kind of like nukes. Fat Man and Little Boy. A lot like these eggs you drop from the sky to produce a new eon, right? Because
now that I look at it closely, they both together at least kind of have this like Pandora's box, apocalyptic horses coming through. Like, it just seems very doomsday-ish, that little excerpt of the entire picture.
I do want to say this thing is like got me mind blown right now. I mean, I do see, in my opinion, is obviously I always see eyeball symbolism and everything, but I'm not going to even get into really all that. But up here, I mean, the reason I focused in on this is that is exactly what I say I see when the black sphere and the white sphere separate from themselves. Looks like this shit on top of Toth's head. And again, like even with the chariot, if you look at the chariot or the Toth deck, the wheels are busted. That motherfucker broke because now they're not yoked anymore. they're still yoked right now, and they'll be spinning together until it destroys itself, which you're going to have to do in a sense anyway. You're going to have to destroy yourself to have a magical experience. But you have that, and I mean, even the wheels, like the spinning wheels, I mean, that's like the movie reels that I got on my own logo. I mean, this even goes back to shit like that I'm trying to point at. So, like, this
The
is
crescent moon, he was very much on his head like horns of Pangu or any number of deities.
Mm-hmm.
If you zoom out real quick there, you can think about the egg as if it's a right eye, and this is the pupil up here at the top, right here, and all of the rest of this would be the whites and everything else. That's rolling back into that. You gotta blur your eyes for a minute, and you can
Oh,
see.
I can see it. Yeah, good eye.
You see what I'm saying? If you blur it out a little bit, you can kind of see where I'm coming from. What they're showing you is the eye is kind of this macrocosm within the microcosm. It's right.
And one thing I do want to add, which is just the thing I can't quite understand how the hell this has happened. When you start looking at stuff this old, I'm sure this is probably some old work. Anywhere from like the 15th to 1700s, anybody who was anybody when it came to occultism, they were talking about the fucking eyeballs in the brain.
Right.
So the artwork is going to be representing that somehow, somewhere, because they were all polymaths. They include physiology. So that has to. I don't know where the hell that this got disconnected in the last whatever few hundred years. But so the reason why I'm saying that is like I do think it's quite possible that this old art is showing that, because that's the most stuff you'll see is coming from those dudes.
Right. I think what we've done is we've separated the experiential from the observational. You can't observe something without experiencing it. So I put out this small thread talking about the difference between occult scientists and mainstream scientists. Mainstream scientists won't push a button if they don't know how the button works, right? Occult scientists are pushing all the buttons in the elevator. They want to see it all.
Let's see what happens. I got to know for myself.
Exactly. You're pushing. You got to know what each one of these buttons do, because the buttons exist. Not why the buttons exist, not how the buttons work. You're just pushing them all to figure out what's going on.
Right.
But mainstream science has sort of reserved itself to only examining the things that mainstream science recognizes as being a button. Once you step outside of that box, you can start to push a lot more buttons and figure out how they work. You're never going to figure out how a button works unless you push it. This is the problem where we're at right now. And at the bottom, what do you see? The bottom of the eye, below observation, you see heretics being persecuted for their beliefs. On the right side, you see this guy about to be beheaded for praying to God because he pushed too many buttons. On the other side, he's being used as a puppet. He's on a string. The guy behind him is threatening him as these other people are praying to him. You can see the imagery of heresy and puppetry right there. What they're saying is that below observation is the level of belief. That's not cool. That's not great. Push the buttons, people. Push the buttons. Let's figure out how this works. You can't do it without pushing buttons.
That's true. That's well said. As spoken as a true magician.
Great observation on that. That's such a profound polarity of our experience and our learning and our life and the results. Are we going to kneel and or betray, or are we going to look above, look inside? Like you're pointing out how it kind of has the eyes rolling back inside the head, like go within. And that's where everyone's black. You look inside, right? Like it's all black. And that's where the truth is anyway.
Right. Well, these woodcuts were meant for meditation. All the alchemical woodcuts were meant for meditation. You're supposed to view them from 100 different perspectives before you get the full meaning of the thing. Because in each and every one of these tiny little aspects, you're adding. You're not subtracting. You're adding. And what most mainstream science does is they subtract. They try to take things out of their natural environment, put them into an unnatural environment so you can study them under laboratory conditions. We don't exist as laboratory conditions. We don't exist as laboratory conditions. Something is always acting on us, something is always pulling on us, and that's okay. That's an all right place to be in the world, because that is the natural state of things. You cannot isolate things from other things.
Yo,
We
you
all
wouldn't exist without push and pull in our heart,
exactly.
our lungs. You know, everything, our whole existence in our body is basically a push and a pull, back and forth.
It's through the power of association, free association, where we're not confining ourselves to these mundane details that we're given as the totality of life, that we can finally move beyond those mundane details. So it's that free association while also having that guiding star. It's very, very important to understand there's always a guidance in your life. There's always a guidance, and you can't necessarily block that in. The guidance is the most wild thing. The guidance, even though it leaves you no choice, that guidance is freedom. And that's the real like polarity when it comes to freedom, is that you are more free when you have less choices. Because then what do you have to lose? Right? I know me and JJ,
Sure.
we're in a situation where it's like we're given so little options when it comes to our personal lives that we don't have a choice. And there's a sense of freedom in that. I can go all out to try and make what I want to see for myself and for my family a reality. We are free to pursue that to the fullest.
Sure.
Through no fault of our own, we're now forced into that perspective. And then we can kind of achieve a sense of freedom through not having a choice because we know what we want, and having that focus is a sense of freedom that you don't get when you're just given, the options of Coke and Pepsi, options are
Eggs or egg beaters, right?
right.
What's real and what's not real.
Having a sense of duty does not leave you much choice, but it does leave you a lot of choices in the realm of what you can do in terms of tactics to get what you need done, right? And I think about Alexander the Great. He didn't have an option. He had to be in charge of the conquest of all of these different places. He's still celebrated by the places that he conquered thousands and thousands of years later. Think about that as a guiding star. It's like he showed the world what could be done by a man at 27 years old, optimizing his ability to do the thing he was best at.
Well, with a name like Alexander the Great, he had a lot of reputation to live up to.
It came from his dad. So his dad, you know what his dad's conquest was?
What's that?
He conquered democracy.
Oh.
So the democracy in Athens thought that it would be best if they paid a local tribe to take over the oracle at Delphi. These are called the Sacred Wars.
Okay.
So they had a proxy army go in there and start shaking down all of the pilgrims to the oracle at Delphi for money. And they started stealing from all of the pilgrims going to the oracle to find out their future, because it's democracy and they didn't want to get their own hands dirty pilfering money, holy money. So Philip of Macedon decided that he was going to create an army to go in there and liberate the oracle at Delphi from the coercive influence proxy war from Athens. And so each and every one of his soldiers put on the diadem of the wreath of Apollo, because the Oracle at Delphi is ruled by Apollo. And they went in there and drove those bastards who were being paid by Athens into the sea wearing the wreath of Apollo, right? Because that was their religion. That was their full focus. And so Philip of Macedon, after defeating democracy, after he conquered the tribes that were occupying the Oracle at Delphi, and then occupying the pass that everybody knows from 300. If you guys have ever watched that movie, that pass there, he occupied and cut Athens off from the rest of Greece and said, you know what, you're gonna surrender to me, and I will be the unquestioning ruler of all of Greece. And they had to, because they're Democrats, and Democrats fold as soon as you show a little bit more power than what they're willing to, put into it. And so that was the death of democracy at Athens, is when Philip of Macedon said, you will have no more proxy wars. What are we doing right now in Ukraine? Proxy fucking wars.
Right.
Because these politicians don't want to get their hands dirty by sending more Americans over to die like they did in the Gulf War. It's a very 1-to-1 ratio sort of thing. And now maybe Trump is going to say, I'm putting an end to democracy. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's the pattern that we're in now. The sacred wars are over. The neocons have lost it. We cannot sustain our empire by taking over the holy lands around the only holy land for the neocons, right? That's not going to work anymore. You could see them sort of, turning the dials on all the little exterior pieces to that holy land. And they don't like it. They don't like it at all. But there's also this Moshiach that they have to keep in mind. So they want Trump to be the Moshiach for their people, because that's how their culture is geared. But in a lot of ways, he put a guy who is America First in charge of all of Middle Eastern affairs. And people like Michael Savage are going nuts right now.
Right.
Because
the warmongers are up butthurt.
America first instead of putting Israel first.
Sure.
So you've got to kind of see Trump as being a Philip of Macedon character. What Trump wants more than anything is a legacy that surpasses all other U.S. presidents.
Oh, for sure.
And if you think about it, that's not too hard to do. You have to be decisive and you have to make the right decisions. It really isn't.
It's not. It really isn't. You're right. Some folks already consider him better than Washington. So, you know what I mean? Like, there is already that element of society.
So I think from an occultist perspective, what better time to introduce the egg of destiny? What better time to solidify the ancient practices of whatever watcher cult we're talking about, where they want to open these cosmic eggs and see this new hierarchy of souls that are being hatched on the earth, just like in that alchemical image. Those little babies, they come from an egg. Babies don't come from eggs. They come from people. Right. But when you're introducing new souls to the planet, you've got to use an egg, don't you?
Oh, for sure. The comment, that comment right there, the Enron nuclear egg. Have you all seen that? What's that about?
Don't know anything about that.
I'm unfamiliar.
I've seen it. Enron's back on Twixter. They got this Enron company, like the old power company. They claim to be the old power company. They're touting some sort of nuclear egg.
This is a libertarian troll. I don't know if you guys know this or not. But the guy who bought Enron for pennies on the dollar decided to use it as a way for his cryptocurrency company to make satire posts.
Sure.
Enron Nuclear is saying, we're promising every American a nuclear egg they can put outside the back of their house and create this nuclear energy for themselves and anybody they want to. It's a free energy type thing.
Yeah, I presumed it was probably a bit, right? Because it's Enron, you know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense, right? I hadn't really looked into it further, so I'm glad you mentioned that. But isn't it weird that it's an egg, though, right? It seems to be very, timed right now with all this rest of this egg stuff.
Think about the green egg.
Interesting, yeah.
Everybody's seen Ace Hardware. They have the big green egg where
Sure.
you've got a smoker and a grill all integrated into one. What shape is that? It's the narrow part down, fat part on top.
Yep.
It's the same idea. If we're going to talk about loosh, we have to talk about the big green egg and where we are inside that big green egg. How do they keep the loosh flowing? They have to smoke you like they smoke the big green egg. So there is an aspect of Gnosticism here. If they can keep the narrow focus on the material plane, keep the oblique focus on the sky where it just doesn't really matter too much, it's kind of a background influence, then the idea of putting the narrow end on the bottom and the fat end on top makes sense. But everybody thinks of an egg with the narrow part on top and the fat part on the bottom. Where's the disconnect? I believe that the disconnect is that the average people would rather have a clear and focused guiding light as opposed to a nebulous and diffuse guiding light. They would rather have the focus be on the sky, building for something greater, building for a life that has a foundation that can support them, as opposed to having the whole thing balance on the tip. The current political system we're under has the eggs balance and focus on the material realm instead of the spiritual realm. Right?
Right. It's inverted.
They have to balance it with mind control. And then we can understand why inversion is so important to these people.
Sure.
You know, it's a basic geometric concept. And when you have that geometric idea in your head, you don't get fooled by the people making the inversions. What's important to you? Who is close to you? Help the people out around you. Offer to help the people out around you, because it's the offering that people really feel close to. If you're a person who can do something for somebody else, you can increase their life just by offering, even if they don't need your help. Do it because you can do it. That's the difference. If you're doing it because you have to do it, it's not really an offer.
Yeah.
You know, this goes back to what we're doing right now with the occult rejects. We're changing the focus. People have benefited from the ideas that we've presented them. You know, Nick has to support this whole thing by himself. So I think if people understand that if they can, they should feel that sense of duty to try and make this thing more sustainable. This is where we're at, where we always find ourselves, is you've got to be able to reach out and say, look, I like what you're doing. Let's keep doing it together. You know, every time you extend your energy to somebody else, you create more energy. That's what we're at. You know, the egg is a very potent symbol. Victor Schauberger used the egg to break everything in his log flumes, right? I don't know if you guys have looked into Victor Schauberger too much, but this guy they call the water wizard. He built the bell-shaped UFO for the Nazis, right? He was
I want to be a water wizard.
Right.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you, be a water wizard. Get into it. But
Water wizard with a cult.
Why not? I believe cults are good and religions are bad. That's an ancient concept. Like a cult is a group of people who are devoted to figuring out a thing. A religion is where you've trapped everybody into the same binder. So,
well, they probably, but unfortunately, they both get taken to the same extreme.
Right.
I like to build on that in the believers and seekers, right? The religious, they already have reached a conclusion and they have their belief, where the seekers, they're not sure, like they're making new discoveries.
That's a good way to put it, Ethan. Yeah, for sure.
So Victor Schauberger got famous for building a log flume to help the loggers out as they were harvesting German forests. And what he did was at the very base of this log flume, he would build a half egg. And that half egg would keep the logs from busting through the other side of the flume. Because think about it real quick. As the logs are coming down this massive slide that allows that log to float into this basin, what he would do is he would create a half egg to where the water would come down and gently slope up at the end. So the floating logs would come down that ramp, and the water sloping up at the end would break them, and they wouldn't have to break through the other side of the log flume. And if you think about the gestation of an egg, you can kind of see how keeping the waters in balance from the top to the bottom and keeping them from developing too fast or too slowly is important. Well, when you put an egg underwater and you've formed this cushion of water all around the outside of the egg, you get a levitation effect, right? And so Victor Schauberger is also credited with creating a different type of levitation where you're pushing air down on the outside of an egg-shaped wing, right? You're pushing it on the outside of this egg-shaped wing that creates lift through negative pressure on the outside. So as you're pushing the air down around the outside of this underside of the impeller, it starts to rise because you've created a pressure differential. So it's like that wing shape that you would get. I mean, think about a wing. It's kind of like a distorted egg shape, right? All flight is based off of the shape of an egg. Well, if you've got that same kind of egg shape underneath the propeller, you're getting more lift than you would without it because it's creating that negative space underneath. And that negative space is what creates the lift. It's not necessarily the thrust that creates the lift. It's the negative space that does it.
Mm-hmm.
And so Victor
That's a good
Schauberger
point.
used the egg to create a stasis field. And that stasis field is the only place where life can develop. It's the only place. That basic geometry is universal. But unless you can see it and visualize these things, how can you really get to those primordial concepts? It goes back to Plato and his academy. Let people who are ignorant of geometry not enter here.
Right.
Geometry is so important.
Not for sure. I mean, it is, yeah. And mathematics is important for sure, just generally speaking.
I think there's something spiritual about it. There really is. And we've gotten away from it. When Pythagoras died, mathematics became mechanics. And there's something dead about mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have that spiritual essence to it. And, you know, the places where that spiritual essence to mathematics has survived, they've done nothing with it. Freemasons were the original conspiracy theorists. They were. Nobody denies that fact. But what are they doing with it? And how many fingers are pointing at them now for harboring the wrong kind of fucking people?
Right.
What are we doing with this knowledge? How are we building with it? That's what matters, because that allows people who have the duty to take care of themselves and their community to really rise up to the places they should be.
Well, now you got Freemasons in the conspiracy community selling people dumb shit.
Always
You're
have.
actually making people more stupid. Listen
Right.
to this shit. Selling them fairy tales, for real, fairy tales.
Right. No, it's absolutely true. You're selling people fairy tales if you can't put the knowledge into action. And the people who have the duty and the responsibility and they feel it deep within themselves, they should have a way of returning it. We're returning our energy into our communities. That is what sacred geometry is when you return your energy into your communities. I mean, this kind of says it all.
Yeah.
Gustav Klimt's idea of reincarnation through the blood, it's not just blood, it's also soil. You have to leave a better foxhole.
Yeah.
You really do. Because unless you impart that duty into other people, what are you left with? Just dead, barren ground.
Sure.
I like to think of sacred geometry as a means to conceptualize and understand the non-physical, right? Because geometry means earth measure, right? And when you put it in terms of sacred geometry, it's a earth measure of non-physical things. And so sacred geometry, like you just pointed at the picture behind you, Headless, is in so many images and so many shapes and Fibonacci sequence and so many different things, but it's also, I think, a way to kind of pierce the veil, if you will. So kind of like the math and the geometry is a way to better understand that subtle energy, right? Because there's no number, right? It's a matter of understanding non-physical things in its very core.
Well, I like to think that it's a combination of lives, right? So if you think about, I've talked about this before, the rat ancestral study. The thing that they've been able to isolate from the rat ancestral studies is the fear of the response. It's a stimulus response that gets carried over to the next generation.
Sure.
But once that stimulus response is carried over to the next generation, there's something called duty that then is produced simply by the passage of time, right? That duty then becomes, you have to warn people about what's coming next, because as these sperm donors of these people who have been through the stimulus response fucking ringer exist, we know what comes next after the stimulus, and it's not good. Instead of being harvested, now we can say, hey guys, this is the answer. We have to come together as a community. We have to look after our own. These perspectives that we put forward are valuable, and it has to be seen as a duty to respect and promote those values. I know other people feel it too,
Sure.
but it has to be put into action.
It's very interesting that you bring up loosh, right? I find that's a really commonly used word now, less so than archons or archontic, which would be the would-be entities that are seeking the loosh, our energy that's negative, that we're driven on these unconscious, often mostly fear-based directions. And so it's almost as if many of these different images and ideas were communicating many different allegorical concepts, even that of loosh, right? And I think if you look at what they were saying with archons and loosh, if for lack of a better word that they might have used, there's potentially non-physical and physical and non-psychic and psychic energies or beings out there. I know that's crazy to suggest, but when you look at it through that,
you're on it. So archon is immensely important in our society. Everything we do is governed by an archonic nature.
Yeah, sure.
Right? So anarchy. It's very self-defeating, anarchy. So it's no leadership, no No arcane. But the problem is that's not what nature shows us. Nature shows us that there's always an archon, whether it's hunger, whether it's sleep, whether it's any of these other things that keep us alive, there is an archon of that thing. It goes back to the definition of what a god is, right? So, what is the nature of the archon? A lot of this Gnosticism talks about the planets being archonic forces in our lives. It's true to an extent. We are flavored by the archon. We are given a essence by the archon. We are not given total determinism by the archon. What I think a lot of the Gnostic sects would get into is that total determinism, right? If you know yourself and if you know the archonic forces that are influencing yourself, you can use those to the maximum benefit of yourself and your community. The archons, while limiting you, give you gifts. And those gifts are vital to the duty you feel towards the people closest to you or the people that you feel you have a duty to. So arcanism, I think, is the idea of flavoring what you have a duty towards.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has that sort of a flavoring to them. Do they use that archonic flavoring to the maximum benefit? And I think the vast majority of people don't, because if you feel a duty towards certain types of people, you are given a label, right? And so there's this false arcanism, which is not connected to nature. It's connected to doctrine. It's connected to teachings. It's connected to the people who are trying to transform the natural archonic nature away from what it is to something they want it to be. That's when you get involved with that false archonic nature. If you look at the Gnostic texts from the Roman period to today, there's no comparison. We're under so much more archonic control and false archonic control today than there was back in that era. The Romans had to put out very clear rules about citizenship. They had to put out very clear rules about what you could or could not do. Today, we have no clear rules, and there are no specific ways that people can interact without subjecting themselves to subjective rules based off of the tides or however these people feel. Now, I'm saying that the lines that are being drawn politically are starting to shift in a big way. But just because Elon Musk is popping a Roman doesn't mean that we're in that period of clear archonic control. Clear archonic control eliminates any possibility of people being, drug out of their house for completely incomprehensible reasons. You know that if you have a relationship to the people who are doing the subversion, you're putting your own self at risk. Right now, you don't know where those lines are drawn. There is a decentralized component to this archonic control, which is probably why they're giving us these eggs. They give you the egg so that you can reconnect with something primal, and yet not know anything about yourself that is primal. You get the soy face over the egg. You're like, I want to know what's inside the egg. Show me what's inside the egg. What's inside the egg is what's inside yourself. We're all part of the same universe. Let it go. What is your duty telling you to do? What is your innermost spirit telling you to do? And that's something you can connect with, but it's not something you can be given.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important. What have you connected with that you have not been given?
You were talking about aligning with the aspects of different gods that you might associate with at that given time in Tai Chi or Tai Chi related practice. Um, I think it's Zhu Dao. They seek, or one can seek to meditate on aligning oneself with the Tao, and really making that be you, not Ethan, not Headless, whatever, not any of these even real cultural influenced perceptions and personas we might have. Just try to align with nature and seek what nature is, and just try to be alike.
Right. We can't control all of the forces around us, but we can identify and utilize. Identify and utilize are the two most important watchwords when it comes to duty, because we all feel a sense of duty. But how are we breaking those logs as they come into our lives before they completely destroy the bin that they're contained in?
Sure.
We have to have that egg, that idea of the Om, right? It's that sense that we can control the flow of energy in our own lives. And this is uniting East and West, because if we know anything about the Proto-Indo-Europeans, if we know anything about these pre-written languages, we know that they were uniting both the sky and the earth in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
As the earth and the sky were separated in these primordial times, those two forces have to come back together in the lives of the people who act for things to get better. Alignment, understanding duty, understanding the things that are essential to you without anybody else's information. That's what we must get to achieve aletheia. Aletheia is the revealed truth. I believe that's the opposite of the occult, right? This comes back to Parmenides. Parmenides originally came out with the term aletheia. It has the similar connotation of self-contradiction that anarchism does. It does, because lethia is the cup that makes you forget. Lethia is not forgetting. Do not forget who you are. You're given all this stimulus, you're given all this response, but you cannot take the cup of aletheia in an ignorant fashion. You have to say, I know who I am. I refuse to forget. And that is where we are today, because we're given so much stimulus response that we're supposed to forget who we are. Aletheia. Forget it not.
I like that, and I like how on these ancient walls, or at least some of them, where they say "Know thyself," but they never say "Believe this way," where that's kind of how people present themselves nowadays. Like, I believe this way. No, what are you really?
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about with the duty, it really has this allegory of the cave kind of idea to it, where the freed prisoner has to go back into the rat trap and tell everybody, even though he thinks it's probably going to be useless or maybe it won't be successful, he has this biological instilled duty to go.
Who's pushing that boulder back up the other side of the wall?
Sisyphus.
That's Sisyphus.
Mm-hmm.
He's happy because he's fulfilling his duty, even though it seems pointless from the outside.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a good example.
It's deep within ourselves. It's deep within us. And I think the idea of aletheia really cuts through the occultism that we've experienced. because occultism takes all of that stuff and makes it the garbage strata of media. Occultism is what you see on a McDonald's commercial. It's supposed to awaken all those little triggers that you have no control over so that you buy without thinking.
Drink Coke, drink Coca-Cola. Or I'm sorry, enjoy Coca-Cola, right? It's the subliminal messaging they can put in the logo, right? Or the phrase.
You're not supposed to enjoy your own life.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to enjoy your own essence. You're supposed to enjoy Coca-Cola.
Right.
I mean, we're given an egg right now, people. Do we take the egg that's been offered, or do we accept the egg that's within us? That's the real question. This is the balance.
I might have said this before in other podcasts, but a great distinction to kind of embody this lesson is to not be reactive, but to be responsive. And it's a subtle difference in words, but it's basically realizing, why do I want McDonald's? Just because I saw that stupid commercial. I don't need that. I want to do so, or there's different ways to embody it, but just I think that language is helpful.
For sure.
Nick,
I got something real quick I want to add with the for drawing this to a close with this egg stuff. I want to point out that one of my favorite ancient alien cargo cults, not when I say favorite, but one I talk about a lot, Scientology meets the CIA with the folks of Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff from SRI, Stanford Research Institute. There's their book right there from I believe 1980s.
That's amazing. What an image.
Of course.
And so this is about psychic connection with entities, or what?
I'm not familiar. That's a good question. I'm not familiar with the book.
Okay.
It is a good question. I presume it is. It's probably all around the the psychic spies and stuff they were in charge of and whatnot.
It's fascinating, the connection with the paranormal and the psychic and the remote viewing and all these tangential things with the so-called UAPs and UFOs. It's like twisted and intertwined. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I thought I'd share that one there. I try not to get too much into the details and the weeds of Scientologists and their tomfoolery, but it is interesting that they would use an egg on the psychic book about because it's not uniquely about aliens that I'm familiar with, at least, but it is by guys who were ancient alien cargo cultists and
so that's a Mormon who wrote that.
Well, that was a Scientologist. If you're not familiar, I believe it's Hal Puthoff. I think he's a OT. Is it Puthoff? I think Puthoff's an OT7, which I think allegedly OT8's like their top one.
Wow,
this dude's a clown right here. Total clown.
Yeah.
I love your cat.
He's a clown.
Isn't he an OTO guy?
Yeah.
But even though he's a clown, what does he say? The whole universe is in your head.
I know. I will tell I have no doubt in my mind that he does not understand stuff that he probably knows way more than me. Put it that way, and understands way more than me. But he's a clown. He's not coming out and saying the truth. He tells you silly stories that's deeply occulted that you have to have an experience to even know what the motherfucker's saying. Come out and say it openly, man. Say it openly, for fuck's sake. You're gonna drop dead soon anyway. Who cares?
This right here is their religion. This right here is the religion of OTO.
I'll be totally honest with you. When I had a magical experience, a lot of shit that came out of that dude's mouth that I was like, holy fuck. Now a lot of this shit is actually deep, but nobody would know what the fuck he's saying.
The symbol that he put together here on the cover is the Philosopher's Stone.
Oh yeah, this is David Schumacher. Yeah,
you have the only thing missing is the square, but you have the cross in the egg, which is a square, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got the circle on the outside, the sun image, light kind of thing, the triangle, the circle on the inside, the egg, and the cross.
one thing I want to get to before we get outside of this realm of symbolic universe. Symbolic universe. Where does that exist at?
Mind.
Mind, but there's a specific state that we all go through where the symbolic universe is crossing over the physical universe and giving us visions of what we think and what we feel and what other things think and feel. It's the dream realm. The dream realm is the crossover between the physical universe and the symbolic universe. The very nature of these dreams are symbolic. We spend half our lives in the symbolic universe. And yet, do we even think of it as a different realm? As a different thing from our ordinary existence? It's sort of seen as being tangential, but it is essential to understanding ourselves. The symbolic realm is what gives birth to language. The symbolic realm is what gives birth to our careers, to our duties, to all of the things we understand. How much less could you understand if people didn't systematize the symbolic realm into a way that we can communicate even right now? See what I'm saying? Like, these dreams are part of the core of our existence and most mammalian existence as we know it. You know, I mean, I wish we could get the mammalian biologists to say, pay attention to your dreams. It's half your fucking life. Wake up to your dreams. It's right there in front of you. It's trying to tell you something about yourselves that is essential that you cannot understand without those dreams. This is the symbolic realm made flesh. And that's important because what we see in our lives is limiting and depressing, but what we can do in our dreams is beyond all conception. And those dreams led us to where we are today. We feel it in our souls, so much so that people are led from one side of the world to the absolute opposite side of the planet because of dreams. And the symbolic realm is in the dreams. We wouldn't have language without it. We wouldn't have writing without it. There is something so fundamental to life within the dream. It's a beautiful thing. But I think every time we dream, we're going into the egg. We're going into that egg and understanding the breaks that are placed off of the chaotic realm we think we exist in. But it's both the material realm and the symbolic realm that come together in our dreams. And we really have to pay attention to that. And we really have to pay appreciation to that, because that is what gives us visions of the future. And those visions of the future can be called hope. And hope is so vital in a world that is hungry for our flesh and our blood. Do we let it take all of that stuff from us, or do we let duty guide us with what is taken and what is given? Duty, flesh, symbology, these things are primal, very, very primal. And everybody can feel it. And it doesn't matter where you come from or where you're going, but you do know that there are different flavors of this stuff. And once you can understand that, you can understand how everything can work together better than it is right now. And that is a vision for the future that I don't think a lot of futurists and computer scientists have really grasped. They don't understand it.
Sure.
It's
They got a different perspective altogether, don't they?
Right.
So it's,
I think if we're wrapping up,
yeah, I think that's a good spot right there, my man. Yeah, I think everybody else is good. Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much, guys, all of you, especially you, Headless, for bringing
Awesome
the topic.
combo.
Yeah, yeah, that was
Yeah.
some really interesting stuff. Some
Awesome
interesting
stuff.
art that I got to look at today. Thank you. The chat actually had a lot of pretty cool stuff in there going on. There was a lot of people in here from all three channels too, so that was pretty cool. Thank you, everybody, because I can see everybody's comments. So I appreciate it. I saw somebody actually went through all three shows and said, "I'm here and I'm on this
I
one."
saw
and I'm on
that.
that one. I appreciate that. I think it was something, pal. Appreciate that. He
Yeah.
went through all three.
I believe
All
it's
three of our
fuck
YouTube.
you, pal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's his name. Fuck you, pal. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, he gave us all 3 clicks.
Nice.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, so thank you everybody who joined the live. That's why I like going live. It's pretty cool. We always got good chats going on. Everybody's pretty pretty is he doing it again?
He's doing it again, yeah.
Everybody's pretty cool, you know what I'm saying? There's no arguing. The chat's pretty laid back, but like really good stuff and really good jokes sometimes. So definitely check it out if I leave the replay up. And thank you, Ethan and JJ, for sure, for jumping on such a short notice. I was really
Appreciate the invite.
and I always appreciate you guys' input in the Occult Rejects, you know? So, yeah, that is the end of another one. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.